All right, so I am Amber Coleman. To Blurred Spectrum, I'm known as Lady Giovanni. Um, Now I know we have Chase, and just want to make sure I'm pronouncing that right, Bolling.
Bowling, like the sport, no W.
Okay. All right, we have Chase Bolling here, and just wanted to ask you a few questions. I'm made aware that you are a novelist. So
Mhm.
how did you get started, and what was your inspiration to becoming a novelist?
So I started writing my first book probably I want to say like in the late summer of 2018. And really, I had a conversation with my nephew. He told me, you know what, if you write a book, your life will change. Right. And my mom was sick. The guy that raised me, like my father, was dying with cancer. And so just the real world sucked. And so I kind of started writing as a way to deal with the stress, try to do something productive rather than spiral. And it was shortly after Black Panther had come out. And I'm a huge fan of Afrofuturism. I'm a huge historical martial arts nerd, right? So I'm big into historical African martial arts, historical European martial arts. And so I kind of wanted to create something for my fellow blurs, you know what I'm saying? And so I started writing this story of this blur from the hood who leads this rebellion after medieval weapons become the only weapons. And what started out as a short story to entertain, my nephew and my friends ended up becoming my first novel. And I was indie for a while because I tried to do the traditional things, sending query letters, trying to find an agent, and all of that kind of came to a halt. I was in a car accident. This guy T-boned my car, almost killed me. I went through my windshield. My car was in like 3 different pieces when they pulled me out. Everybody swore I was dead, and that's kind of what woke me up. Like, no, 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 please, I'm alive. Don't leave me in this car. I smell smoke, or something to that effect. I tried to speak. I couldn't really talk because like my face kind of ate the windshield. And after that, I got diagnosed with traumatic brain injury, a bunch of nerve damage. I was butthurt. Like my life as I had known it was kind of over. And so I just kind of hid out. I chilled in the pantry for most of the time because my son, like life was a lot. Like there was a lot dealing with stimulus stuff. So I kind of picked a spot in the house where I was kind of enclosed. And one day my wife was like, hey, bro, you can't stay in this closet forever. And I was like, I'm done. Like it's a wrap. I can't work my job no more. Like everything is different. She's like, you wrote this book. So she's like, go ahead and put it out there and see what happens. And so, that's how I got started. Maybe 8-9 months after I self-published, I was approached from an individual with Wahida Clark Presents Publishing. And actually about not even a post about my book, it was a post about Charles Saunders, who they call the father of the sword and soul genre. And so he created this book called Emerald that's low-key like Conan set in the fictional fantasy Africa, right? And it was like my first real introduction into the genre. And when he passed away, like I was really hurt because that had been one of my goals. Like I'm gonna write this Sword of Soul book. I'm gonna meet the father, Sword of Soul, Charles Saunders. When he died, I was just like,
Yeah.
And then Melton Davis, who had been working with this brother for years, many years, never ever got to meet him in real life. And so it was just really sad. And so I posted about it on Instagram, and the rep from Wahida Clark Presents reached out to me like, yo, who is Charles Saunders and what is Sword and Soul? And that kind of led to a conversation with Wahida about her fantasy book. And so together we kind of put our heads together and we came up with SFF for the Culture, which is, her science fiction fantasy imprint that's dedicated to science fiction, fantasy, horror, speculative fiction from diverse authors and our allies.
Okay. Dope. So, other than you just having an interest in sci-fi, what made this your genre that you wanted to publish?
Um, Coming up, like I'm from Bridgeport, Connecticut. When I was growing up, they used to call Bridgeport Beirut because it was just like it was the hood, it low key still is the hood. And so I always enjoyed things that took me to a setting or an environment that was something different than what I saw every day. So a lot of the urban fiction didn't appeal to me because it's like, I was in a gang, I sold drugs, I did all these things, and it's like I lived this. So when I read something, when I engage with something, I want something that's going to take me somewhere and make me think about some things that I don't see every day, which is really what drew me towards science fiction and fantasy. And being a huge history nerd, like historical fantasy, historical fiction has always kind of been like a thing of mine. And my mother wasn't really big on fantasy or fiction books, period, when I was young. So I used to be able to sneak it in there if it was a historical fiction book, because obviously, you know, it's a fiction, but you're still learning. So I was able to get those ones by my mom, you know, because she was all about the autobiography of Malcolm X, the autobiography of Benjamin O. Davis Jr. So like I kind of got to sneak that in there, and it gave me that sense of escapism that honestly, I think to this day, low-key saved my life, because days where I might have been out doing other things, I was in the library low-key chilling, reading some stuff that I couldn't let my homies see me reading. So, you know, all in all, it was a blessing.
Awesome. Now, did anyone specifically inspire your book? So I know that a lot of times novelists will take inspiration from their current life. Is there anyone in your current life that has inspired some characters or some personality in your book?
Everybody in my books pretty much, like, especially all of the main characters, allies, are based off of my friends and family, like people I really love and care about. And at the time, you know, it's just a way to show love to my homies and highlight their quirks and what I loved about them. And like, you know, it's been a rough couple of years, so a lot of these fellas aren't here with us no more. And so it's kind of an honor and a pleasure to keep writing the Vanguard series, because like I get to maintain that energy and share their spirit and what I love about them so much with the world. And so that's really important to me. And so like most of my main characters are definitely based off of people that I know. And those that have read the books, y'all know who you are.
That's very touching. I love that. How long has this goal been in becoming a novelist? Like, what age did this start, and how did that blossom?
I think my first real I was a rapper for a long time, right? I used to go by the name of the legendary Thug Poet. Like I've done shows all over the country, and just that was my thing, right? And then every English teacher I ever had said, you know, I know you like rapping and poetry, Chase, but you should write a book, right? You should write a book. And so I remember, in order to graduate from high school, Miss Sullivan, who was my women's lit teacher senior year, because they were just determined that I was going to take that class, she was like, oh no, you got to finish this short story project before you graduate. And so I remember I started it, and I was enjoying the process, but I never finished it because it wasn't done, and I refused to turn it in because it wasn't done. And I had like blown the word count for the assignment out the water like the first 2 days I started writing. And I was like, no, nobody can see it. And so my mother kind of chest moved me and put it on the jump drive and gave it to my teacher without me knowing, which is probably like the only reason why I graduated from high school on time. And so, like, you know, my mom was like, it was really good. I was like, oh my God, you read it? Like, you know, Miss Sullivan was supposed to read that. Wasn't nobody else supposed to read this? Like, what you doing, bro? And so I kind of always, she's like, yo, you're good at this. You should do this. I was like, you know, nah, I'm out here trapping and rapping, bro. Like, I ain't got time for this. And so really, though, I think that when I started the road of resistance, to my nephew, who is a real intelligent brother, but has never really been in the books, was actually excited about reading it. I was like, yo, for real? Like, for real? Like, maybe I could do this. And so it's been probably about a 6-year journey. I spent a long time, like I said, trying to beat the traditional publishing trail, which anybody that's done it knows clearing is hard. Mm-hmm. Like, won't nothing teach you some humility, like getting a half dozen rejection letters and, you know, people really picking apart your brainchild. And so all in all, I really think that for a minute I had kind of shelved it, you know what I'm saying? Like I wanted to do other stuff, but I realized after the accident, I can't do certain things like I used to do, right? Like I'm kind of having to learn to live with a new reality. And this really gives me an outlet to not only just do something with my life and my time, but, you know, potentially feed my kids and give them something that long after I'm gone, my descendants will have this, right? They'll have the rights to these books and this will be their legacy. And so like now I could say honestly, I've been with Wahida probably since 2020, 2019. So it's really been a goal to kind of just create new fandoms, right, from diverse imaginations. Like that's really just been what we've all been about at SFF for the culture, and what's been my personal goal. Like even if it's not my books, like I want us to have stuff like Captain America or the Hunger Games, but in melanin, you know what I'm saying, from our perspectives. And I think stuff like that is important because you stay away from some of the more toxic aspects, right, of the genre, whether it be stuff like hypersexualization or just typical misrepresentation, right? Because it's not coming through our lens, right? And even though it might be flattering, it's not always necessarily constructive. So I think if we just kind of redirect that energy culturally towards, you know, creating our own fandoms, we can alleviate a lot of these problems.
Right. So with your books, The Road of Resistance and The War We Make, what started off the inspiration behind those storylines?
I'm what you call low-key a prepper, right? And you know, I came of age watching us have the first Black president ever, and then he signed the National Defense Authorization Act in 2012, right? And my brother, God rest him, he was real big in the law and governance and C-SPAN, and I come from a really politically active family. Like really, my family's been about that life since Lincoln's Loyal League, right? With the activism and the community service and said rabble rousing. So it's definitely in my blood, it's in my pedigree, and like just governance, you know, looking at it. And so when I saw that our president gave this nation authorization to incarcerate people with no trial, right? They don't got to say nothing to nobody for an act of belligerence, which is exceptionally broad. Like, you know, you can spit on the ground as a politician walks by, and that could be an act of belligerence, and now you're in Abu Ghraib. Like, that don't make no sense. And so I was like, this is crap. Like, this government is crap. Everything is crap. It's trash. Oh my God, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And so I think that the Vanguard series was kind of my way of poking fun at the government and kind of put myself in that situation. Like, what would you do if somebody hit the reset button and it was revolution time, right? Like, how would that play out? Because everybody want to fight the revolution, but nobody knows what to do after you win, right? Like, how do you put things back together? And that's a major component of the Vanguard. And it's like, you know, I looked at the parallels, because at the time when I was writing, like, Wakanda, everybody was Wakanda forever, and that was dope, but that was not for us, right? Like Kevin Feige and they were really clear about saying, like, yo, this is an African story about people in Africa, right? And so I was like, you know, I'm going to tell an American story about Africans in America and our experience, because as an Afro-Indigenous person, like, I have more than one lineage. You know what I'm saying? Like, some of my ancestors were already here. So I really wanted to tell a story that kind of highlighted that and kind of brought that element of Camelot, but for us in this post-apocalyptic setting. And so it's kind of how I built the Vanguard. And that was like the real driving force, kind of like a counterinsurgency manual, so to speak.
Got you. I love that. So could we get a little synopsis of each book? Like, what exactly are we looking for in the Road of Resistance, and what exactly is going on in The War We Make?
Okay, so in The Road of Resistance, and it's split into two parts, pretty much this is the jump off point, and I'm serving a lot of like maybe the Last Kingdom meets Power vibes. And so it starts off with this low-key cataclysmic event. This group of government scientists were working on this project for the Department of Defense. They were supposed to be creating a perfect anti-weapon, but they had their own agenda. When they turn it on, it resets weapons technology back to the 6th century, right? So there's no guns, there's no bombs, there's no fighter jets or tanks or any of that. And the government immediately sets about trying to make sure they can maintain control, while at the same time understanding that this is a post-Trump America that we're talking about. And then the books is set up after actually the second Trump presidency. And if it happens, please don't blame me. I didn't write it into existence.
Pulling the Simpsons on us.
No, I swear to God, I'm not. I promise you I'm not. And the first book is definitely kind of like, it's serving you those Birth of a Nation vibes, where our main character, Cassette, who really isn't necessarily a textbook vision of what a fantasy book hero should be, utilize the skills that everybody used to roast him for having. Because what you look like in the hood, sword fighting, like nobody does that, right? And so when medieval weapons become the only weapons, all of a sudden now, this dead skill is all of a sudden super duper relevant. And so he pulls together his friends and his allies that he used to do stuff in the street with, like, listen, bro, this is what's going down. This is what's happening. We got to fight back. And so together they kind of form this diverse Camelot from their post-apocalyptic hood after hate groups and corrupt cops kind of try to turn it into their own personal playground. In the world we make, the story kind of picks up directly after the end of the Road to Resistance Part 2, and the Vanguard is now sort of established, right? Like I said, is now the king of the Vanguard, and he's got these obligations because the entire point of the Vanguard is to protect people from the powers that be. And so they set sail to New York to fulfill this obligation, and at the end of the second book, and Cassette disappears. Nobody knows where he is, and that's kind of how things are left. And what happens in the world we make. I'm trying to pull this together without giving a whole lot of spoilers here. Pretty much we find out that Cassette is the victim of certain powers, right? And his wife, or not really his wife at the time, actually the mother of his children, has to make a choice whether she's going to search for Cassette, right? Or she's going to pick up his mantle and lead the Vanguard on the path that he has set. Because what we're looking at this time is the rise of a new Confederacy in the South. The federal government has sold off portions of America to rich people that are willing to do the work of governing and policing it. And so all of these little private kingdoms pop up under what is no longer the United States of America, but now the Continental American Confederacy. And so I kind of introduced this new reality for America, kind of, if we just let the corporatocracy win. Like, and it wasn't really that difficult. It wasn't really a huge stretch of the imagination to kind of picture and envision some of the things that were going on. But I kicked off a lot of more of the magical realism themes that kind of build slowly in the series, because once we had the government keeping people with certain psychic or magical abilities in check and under wraps, and in these facilities, now there's no more government. And now these people are running around doing different things. And so we get a big taste of that. I imperil my mortal soul studying the occult to kind of make the magic feel real and relevant in a world that it exists side by side with technology. And so there's just all the things that you look for kind of in your epic fantasy books, but given settings and environments that you don't usually get to see. Because usually, you know, this stuff is set in an amalgam of medieval Europe, or maybe if somebody is feeling like real creative, it'll be some sort of Middle Eastern, Far Eastern amalgam, right? We very rarely get to see settings like this in the United States that we know and love.
Absolutely.
So I had a fun time writing it.
Sounds fun, actually. Because I've never personally heard of a story like this, so I'm very intrigued. And I love that you use not only your experience, but the village that you have that supported you after that tragic accident. It's just all around good material, originality, and I'm rooting for this book. I'm going to be looking for more parts, because once you said the second the war we make is a continuation of the Road of Resistance, I'm like, that was a good merge. That was a good way to end that story or that arc, and then continue on with a new one, but still keeping the story within itself.
Yes. But, so altogether, I think I got like 10 books planned. Actually, this November, A Dread and Glorious Kingdom drops. And it is an omnibus containing the first 3 books and also never before seen Vanguard content. Like, it's like a whole book of just backstories, side stories, like stuff expanding on the wider world of what's going on. And then I also add a sneak peek of book 4, Chronicle the Unbroken. So I'm just really excited about it. It's gonna be a thick boy, but I think it's gonna be really satisfying read.
Awesome. Now, I know you said you're a prepper when it comes down to your stories. What is the process? So I know like there are novelists that do research, there are novelists that submerge themselves within their genre, or they'll go to museums to find inspiration for their novel. So what is your process for creating?
I choreographed every single fight scene. As a matter of fact, every fight scene I write, I choreograph because I am a historical martial artist. And so I own armor and I have a house full of weapons that I train with when time allows. And I try to get on it every day, but I don't always. But I choreograph all of my fight scenes. And really, in the Vanguard, there's this concept called the Covenant of Governance, right? Which is like the Constitution after the Constitution. And like I said, I was raised around politicians. My brother was a page in DC when he went to Howard, right? I spent every day of my childhood watching C-SPAN, you know? So, like, yeah, exactly. It was rough. It was hard. It's really hard, right? But I never ever failed civics or social studies.
I could
And so I took that experience, that life experience of knowing how government works, right? And just knowing what our communities need, right? And kind of repainting it. Like, what would Camelot look for Black Americans? Right? Like, and this is the real question I asked myself. And I was like, first of all, we need to make some additions to this here Bill of Rights because, and so I wrote out the Covenant of Governance, and it was kind of easy to build from there because, like I said, I am a Hama armor geek. Like, I love historical martial arts. Like, you might catch me at a Ren Fair, real talk, bro. Like, you really would. Like, you like going Chase. I'm like, yeah, nah, I'm out here, bro. Gambison and pointy shoes. Like, so it's like a lot of that I just kind of prepared by, like I said, choreographing the scenes, going to visit certain locations so I can map out how a battle would go. Because like a lot of times, you know, you read, you know, battles take place in this open field. Well, you know, ain't that many open fields right here in Bridgeport. Like, even though we are the Park City, we got a bunch of parks. You know, it's not gonna look like Agincourt, right? And so I really would just go walk around, take some pictures, right? Or just sit and vibe and write, you know, because I was driving DoorDash at the same time when I first started writing the books. So I was just a little bit of everywhere, and I passed this real spooky spot. I'm like, yo, word, this would be nice because I just got heebie-jeebies riding through here, and I would never take an order to this address again, but I will.
Been there.
I will. Yeah, I will write about this because this is spooky, dog. And like, no cap. There's this one spot where you ride past it, you never know it was there. It was the site of like this ancient battle between the colonists and the Pequot Indians in nearby Fairfield. And like, yo, you go over there at night, bro, there don't be no crickets, there don't be no animal sounds. It's just spooky, right? And it's like, you know, like something not good happened here. And it's like, yo, I just thought it was me. And then I go and I'm looking and I put in the address where I'm at because I'm thinking like, all right, I'm trying to make it live and be detail oriented for the book. And I find out about this battle and I was just like, word, bro. Like, word. So this really, like, word, like, y'all just massacred some folk here, and this is why, like, this look like this and this feel like this energy is here. And so, like, I did a lot of that. And the places I couldn't get to, I spent hours on Google Earth, right, looking at aerial views, trying to set things up, get the street names right. Like, I went all in. The first version, I remember talking to my buddy, he's an engineer. He's like, oh, bro, let's read, like, work instructions. You got to fix this. Because I was a machinist, you know what I'm saying? And that's what the bulk of my writing was. It's like work instruction. Like, this is how you cut this. This is how you hold the word. This is the feed or the speed that you set the machine to. And so when I was introducing the technology, it's like, yo, this is a really good idea, bro. But you got to write this for people that ain't used to like making blueprints or parts. And so I think all in all together, my experience just being a hoodlum to kind of putting my life back together together and getting into advanced manufacturing technology kind of gives me a different, especially for like the sci-fi side of things. Like I know machines, I was a machinist. And so I think that, and then just being just a huge blurred kind of help, write my love letter to blurred culture.
Absolutely. All right. So now when it comes down to your publishing company that you're currently with, what made you choose them and what do you hope to accomplish while being with this publishing company?
To be real, Wahid and them chose me. Like I said, they plucked me out the muck, so to speak, out of all of the other Black indie authors out there doing outstanding work. Her and DB, they saw something in me and decided to pull me out. And it's like, especially when it comes down to fantasy, like a lot of people don't know that there is such thing as Black sci-fi, Black fantasy, or that we do have all of this stuff. And so I think one of our main goals is kind of to end that sort of moment when people are, oh, you're right, like, yeah, well, what do you write? Like, I write sci-fi and fantasy. We're like, what? I want to end that, right? I want everybody to know that some of the first works of fiction by people of the diaspora on this continent were works of science fiction and fantasy. Like with Blake or The Huts of America, like that's a speculative fiction work that was written by a formerly enslaved person. It is one of the earlier published works in America by a person of color. Like, this is our legacy, right? And so I really just want to be everybody's plug for diverse science fiction and fantasy. Like, and so when you come through and you see that we put something out, it's gonna have something to say for the culture and it's gonna have value. And so like that's really our goal. Like we say it in our mission statement, that it's our fantasy that really impacts our imagination, and that in turn is what shapes our reality. Like what we're doing right now with sci-fi when I was a little kid. Right, like this was the Dick Tracy watch. Now everybody walking around with their Apple Watch or the Morpher, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? and Zordon ain't popping up, but you can get your mama right there on your Apple Watch. Like that was all sci-fi, right? This was all something that some impressionable imagination was touched by, right? And they made it a reality. And so if we don't put ourselves in these conversations, right, and inject ourselves into these imaginations, what's our future gonna look like?
Right.
So that's kind of why we do what we do and what we hope to accomplish. Like, I'd like for every author, comic book creator that comes on, for them to have a fandom that's as successful as Shadow and Bone or Lord of the Rings or Black Panther, because we definitely got content that's worthy of it.
What definitely need to do. It's like, I feel like what we need to understand is that Black people in our minds have been the blueprint for a very long time, but because of how we're perceived, they don't want to give us our credit. And we have to do things like this, where we have to come out with our own publishing businesses. We have to be our own representatives, because for some reason, they're trying to whitewash us out of history. So what you're doing, what Wahida Clark is doing, is exactly what our community needs. And also, what would you say to someone who was like little Bolling? What would you say to somebody a young Black kid wants to create sci-fi novels or create sci-fi comics or go out of the norm of what is expected of Black people in general?
Go for broke, young bull. Like, we don't come from them families that support the arts like that until you've already made some money, right? You know what I mean? And so like is typical. How can I put it? Art is survival, right? Mm-hmm. This is what it is. Even when our ancestors didn't have light, they made art. And so it's one of those things, just understand that what you're doing, what you have to say has value, right? And don't let anybody stop you, right? Because that's the main thing. People will tell you all the time, oh, you can't do this, or you can't do that, or that's not cool, or you can't be original. Define your own cool and say, I tell all my authors, don't start writing until you say what you meant to say. And if you got more to say, then that just means you got to write another one.
Awesome. And last question here. So I know we have the 3 books that you have already published, but what can we look forward to in the future from you? And also, where can we follow you in your socials?
So everybody can check out A Dread and Glorious Kingdom, right? It's available for pre-order and paperback and ebook. And then right now, non-Vanguard related, I'm working on 2 other books. One is tentatively titled Until Fire and Blood, and it's the story of the descendant of Fulani Moors in Al-Andalus during the 12th century, surrounding the events of the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa, right, which was like a huge pivotal turning point for the Moors in Spain. At that point, like, it was all kind of downhill from there. And so I kind of dive into just that Afro-Asiatic presence in medieval Europe. And, you know, a lot of times people try to tell us, like, hey, we weren't there. That wasn't us. That wasn't West African people. That's North African people. And they don't look like us. Like, nah, bro. Because I know in 1187, Yusuf Ibn Tashfin brought at least 10,000 Fulani soldiers, right, from Senegal. Like that, people like us made up some of the great armies of the Islamic caliphates. And so I just want to shine a light on that history and the presence of people of color, not only in Spain, but also in what's known as the Occitan, like southern France. Places like Marseille and Ramtola used to be Moorish colonies. And so I'm having fun kind of bringing that history to life. And then also I've been working on this other project called Constellation of Fates. It's starts off on Earth, but it's going to take place in space, and it kind of talks about constellation. It's low-key kind of got vibes like Don't Look Up meets Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon. Like, I'm kind of having a good time creating some alien races and learning more about physics than I ever thought I'd have to, that I actively avoid learning about in high school and college. So, but it's going to be good. So I'm looking forward. So those projects will be out at some point. Just stay tuned. And if you guys want to learn more, you could always check us out at www.sffortheculture.com. You can check out my website, ChaseBollingAuthor.com. And then I'm on social media, Instagram at actually Chase Bolling Author, and on Twitter at Iron_Bars. Who, if you're like a fantasy geek like I am, you know Melinated, y'all know where that comes from.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mr. Bolling. I really enjoyed this interview. I've learned so much, and I'm looking forward to getting into your novels. And we are also, all of us at Blurred Spectrum are looking forward to more projects from you. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's no problem. You enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
You do the same. I'm gonna go find my kids. They're quiet. That means something bad is happening.
Silence is not good.
Never good.
Well, you have a good one, and thank you again so much for interviewing with me.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a lovely day.
You as well.